It happened on a rain-heavy Friday that the city remembers not for the weather, but for the way one siren erased routine. At 2:18 a.m., a luxury van glided through a tunnel on the outskirts of the city, headlights swallowed by water, radio drowned by static, and everything on board fractured into silence. Two names that had once been shorthand for smiles, endorsements, and sold-out seats were now whispered in the same hush. The quiet star with the smile that could warm 1,000 cameras, and his friend, the one who always soothed that smile behind closed doors. Fame mapped their faces to magazine covers and red carpets. That night, Fame could not fix what was broken. The first ambulance arrived with 2 paramedics and an answering panic. Cameras that would normally follow their lives were mysteriously absent. By dawn, the public was left with one thing: rumors. By nightfall, rumors had become an entire narrative. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story to keep the light burning for truth and compassion. A single vehicle. A slick road. Witnesses later described flashing tires and a faint scream layered beneath rain. The official police report, sparse, clinical, listed single vehicle collision, driver loss of control, 1 occupant with severe head trauma, 1 occupant stable but unconscious. That language numbers the damage, but does not name what pierces human hearts: fear. Emergency workers pulled 2 forms from the wreck. One was stabilized on the pavement and moved with urgency to the stretcher. The other slipped between the fingers of paramedics into something more fragile, a silence heavy with breath. Inside the hospital, the lights were bright and merciless. Friends arrived in small circles. Managers hovered by the doors with press statements. The hospital refused comment. Lawyers read release forms. But for every statement, there were 10 unanswered questions. Why was the van off the main route? Why were the car's seat belts unfastened? And above all, how did 2 people who had been photographed laughing hours earlier end up at midnight in a mangled vehicle? The 2 at the center of the wreck had been people of little drama in public. Their interviews were smiles and practiced vulnerability, their public statements crafted and kind. But offstage, sources close to them describe a different script: late-night hospital visits, whispered conversations in dressing rooms, and a debt of old promises. One friend, a stylist also present the week before the accident, told an anonymous outlet that they were planning to take a break, to rest, to get away. Another voice, lower and older, suggested that both had been carrying more than schedules and costumes. One an unresolved injury from early training, the other an illness kept quiet for the cameras. The art of being a public figure includes hiding the rust in the hinges. But even the tightest closet doors can creak when storms approach. That creak turned into a roar the night the van hit the barrier. As the city turned speculative, more personal details filtered through, not facts, but impressions. Late-night text chains, a key card left at a hospital desk, nights spent in each other's apartments resolving scripts and old fights. Some fans insisted they had seen a closeness that went beyond camaraderie. Others said they'd always been like brothers who shared the same oxygen, and 1,000 inside jokes. There was also the older secret, a medical file passed between a few confidants that referred to intermittent collapse and neurological episodes for one of them. For the other, a history of chronic pain and a small, private surgery 3 months earlier. These hints never reached the official channels. They simply knit together a human picture: 2 men trying to hold everything together while the world watched. When asked for comment, agencies issued measured lines about privacy and respect. That statement, repeated, read like a shield. It is a shield, and behind every shield, a private life continues. If the accident was accidental, why was there a locked trunk and a crumpled envelope with no return address? Why did one of the physicians ask for an urgent review when the ambulance arrived? Those are the details that fed whispers in online forums, fed livestream hosts who milked every minor update into an hour-long interrogation of motive. Police records released a week after the crash were thin. There was no evidence of a second vehicle. There were no charges. But the messy truth of public life is that absence of charges is not always absence of cause. For fans, that absence is fertile ground. One investigator, speaking hypothetically to a journalist, admitted, "We have a lot of small inconsistencies. But sometimes the smallest inconsistencies are not criminal, they're human." That sentence was both damning and bland. It gave no headline but gave a tone. Sometimes the story is not a crime, but a collision of past choices and present pressures. In private, stories became softer. Lunches shared in quiet cafes, a sweater given after a late-night shoot, a hand held in a crowded airport. Love in these pages does not always walk on red carpets. It waits in the peripheral, in whispered reassurances. After the crash, an old voice message surfaced on a friend's phone, a soft apology and a promise. "If anything happens, remember we tried." The message, when aired in isolated clips by late-night channels, became fuel for sympathetic viewers and cruel critics alike. Some declared romance. Others saw brotherhood. Most saw two people who had become everything to each other in the way only those who are tethered by long shared nights can. The question that lingered, if the closeness was romantic, did it add pressure or ease? Sometimes love frees you. Sometimes it adds risk, because the person you trust most is the person you would leap with. The public timeline reached a tipping point when a private audio clip leaked, a voice, raw, under the sound of rain, halfway between a confession and a plea. "I can't do this alone anymore," it said. "I don't want to let you go." No one confirmed the voice. No one denied it. It became, for many, proof that two people had been carrying the same heavy quiet. Within days, hundreds of messages landed on fan sites, candles lit on rooftops, hashtags for healing, fans praying in every language the internet accommodated. The viral empathy was one side of the coin. On the other side, conspiracy channels pieced together flight receipts and transfer logs and presented them with graphical certainty. What those channels lacked in evidence, they made up for in drama. Months passed in an ache of waiting. Rehabilitation became a private pilgrimage. Small steps, a physical therapist's gentle prods, a slow, candlelit recovery in a studio apartment that smelled of lemon and antiseptic. Public sightings became rarer, statements became fewer. In that quiet, two people reassembled their lives, or tried to. One of them wrote a line on social media that fans replayed like a hymn. "The truth is not always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet work we do when no camera is watching." The line was vague enough to be safe, intimate enough to be real. Fans took that as hope. Reporters took it as a crumb. At the local charity event the following spring, a small, untelevised gathering, one of them showed up with a cast on one wrist and a handmade card for a child who had met them backstage once. When a photographer captured that small kindness, the image went viral for all the right reasons. People wanted to believe in recovery. They wanted the narrative to bend toward healing. A year later, there was a short, unannounced live stream, coffee cups, two friends or more, and a conversation that felt like a closure. "We made it through a storm," one said, "and we learned we couldn't always save the other person. We could only be there." The live chat filled with hearts. People who had waited, worried, and speculated sent messages that said simply, "Thank you." The world had been loud when the accident hit, but quiet when the healing began. In that quiet, two artists found a new way forward, not with larger-than-life announcements, but with small appearances, surprise music sessions, and a charity concert in a theater that seated fewer than 1,000. That concert sold out in 15 minutes. It was not a triumphant comeback in the tabloid sense. There were no glittering headlines claiming miraculous transformations. Instead, it felt like a first step out of shadow. Two people on stage, not as icons to be owned by an audience, but as humans who had been broken and were learning to be whole again. This story is not about blame. It is about the brittle line between what we expect public figures to be and the quiet lives they actually live. It is about the costs of spotlight and the small mercies that keep people going. A text at midnight, a shared umbrella, the patient hand that steadies you back to your feet. If there is a lesson in this fictional night, it is a simple one. Be kinder in the spaces where you cannot see. Public lives do not come with instruction manuals, and the people who illuminate our screens live in the same weather we do. Sometimes warm, often rainy, always human. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the story to keep the light burning for truth and compassion.